I recreated Avatar: The Last Airbender in 3D. I know 3D doesn't always have the best reputation when trying to use in 2D shows, but I've been learning Blender for the last 8 months and really want to put my skills to the test. Can I make Avatar: The Last Airbender, an iconic 2D show, look good in 3D? This is the goal, and to achieve this goal, I have to first find out what even makes 3D look good. And I think for iconic shows that are done in 3D, like Arcane and movies like Spider-Verse, it's their unique style. The comic book look in Spider-Verse and that hand-painted look in Arcane. But before I even decide on a style, I gotta first know what characters I'm gonna have in this video. So I thought I'd use Aang since he is the main character and it wouldn't be right not to include him in a recreation of the series. But when thinking of another character he would fight, I was considering between two characters. So one being Zuko and the other one being Azula. And I've always been a fan of Azula and her blue fire and thought she really never got too much screen time in the show. So with that in mind, let's do a fight between Azula and Aang. Luckily, I was also able to find 2 amazing models online, and all I needed to do was just rig them. Basically means just giving them bones so I can animate them. This was definitely one of the hardest parts of this process because I've never really rigged a character with a lot of armor on, like Azula has, or with the kind of cloth-like clothing that Aang has as well. So after 2 days of just straight working, I was just weight painting both the models for Aang and Azula to make sure their clothes and bodies move right. And then adding some more bones for parts like Azula's hair and specific parts of their clothing. And I was able to go from this to this. Honestly, quite satisfying to see the difference. But in the moment, it was kind of mind-numbing, to be honest. Rigging can feel super daunting when you're just starting out. But once you get the hang of it, it's incredibly satisfying. So how do you even start learning something like rigging? Well, that's where Skillshare comes in. Skillshare has classes on pretty much anything you want to learn, like animation, character modeling, drawing, graphic design, and so much more. And complex skills like rigging become way more manageable when someone walks you through the process step by step. Trying to learn from a general YouTube video can sometimes leave you confused or a bit overwhelmed, speaking from experience. But Skillshare classes can make it feel like you're being taught one-on-one, which I think really helps you stay focused and you can really absorb all the info that's being said. One class I actually highly recommend is the Complete Beginner's Guide to Blender 3D. I actually did try this myself, and I was pretty surprised by how easy it was to follow. Everything was broken down really clearly, and it made the learning process way less intimidating. And I oftentimes see many people asking, how do I start? Or what videos should I watch to get into Blender or 3D animation? And honestly, my answer is always the same. You gotta just start. And with Skillshare, that first step doesn't feel nearly as scary because you're not starting alone. You're learning from someone with experience, guiding you through it. I've personally learned so many of my foundational skills through paid online courses and not just straight YouTube. And it made a huge difference in how fast I progressed. So if you're serious about taking a hobby or even a potential future career seriously, give Skillshare a shot. And the first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code on screen will get 1 month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. Then moving on to where the fight scene would take place, which I wasn't really too sure because I didn't want to create anything too complex for the environment since I wanted to focus more on the animation for this project. After some time of contemplating, I decided on the underground Fire Nation hideout Ozai was in during the eclipse in the show. Mostly because it's just a really easy environment to model. So in about 4 hours or so, I finished creating the environment. And now, going back to initially about the style that I was thinking of, I thought that maybe a kind of Pixar style would fit, where they had kind of like realistic textures for all of their models. So with that in mind, I started texturing all the environment, just using basic colors and adding a lot of noise textures to give it a look of being a little more like dirty and scratched. And then for parts of the environments like the banner, where you can see this really nice cool pattern they have on it, I just designed it in After Effects first, and then I would export that into Photoshop, and then export that video as a PNG from Photoshop to then apply it as an image on a plane in Blender. There probably is a much simpler way to do this, but yeah, it's a way I don't know. Anyway, after finishing the texturing of the environment, I used a lot of textures from Polyhaven to texture the clothes, armor, and everything for Azula and Aang. And honestly, I didn't really know if I liked this style, but after contemplating for an entire day, I just decided to go with this. Next up, let's talk about the actual animation for this, which is something I always struggle with since I never usually draw out a storyboard, but I found some really good animations made by Thunder War Studio on YouTube of Artie, Azula, and Aang, and wanted to incorporate some of these movements from their videos in my animation as well. Then with some references from some animes as well that I enjoyed, I came up with a rough idea of what I wanted to see in my own animation. So with that in mind, I got to slaving away. I had the entire idea planned out in my head about how I was going to approach this. So first, I'd start off by animating the camera and very rough movements for both of my characters for all my scenes. Then once getting down the timing of everything, I'd refine it. I did this though for like the first 3 or 4 scenes, but then I just kind of got bored and really wanted to see the scenes I was already working on polished and finished. So I ended up not following my initial idea I had in mind at all and started to refine scenes before even finishing the overall rough draft of the animation. Honestly though, I think this sometimes helps me with my motivation because when I'm just doing the same thing for hours on end, it makes it really hard to keep working on the same project. But when I'm able to see it start to come together and actually see the finished scenes, it keeps me motivated to really finish the rest of the scenes to see it all come together. So yeah, I kind of kept doing the same idea, like doing rough animations for like the next 2 or 3 scenes, then I'd refine it, then I'd render it, and then yeah, so on for the rest of all the scenes. And then with that aside, let's talk about how I approach the animation to hopefully make it look good. I talked about earlier about how many 2D shows that try to use 3D, oftentimes it doesn't look good, but that's because most of the time they are trying to achieve that 2D look in 3D. Which by no means do I think that this can't work. In fact, there are so many amazing 3D animations that go for that 2D style that look absolutely stunning. But it still takes so much skill to pull it off, and that is why it looks bad sometimes. Luckily though, I'm not trying to go for that 2D look, I'm fully embracing the 3D here. So now, thinking about the 3D animations and what makes it look good, it's honestly the same I think as 2D principles. You know, like the typical anticipation, squash, stretch, you know, like the 12 principles of animation. Good thing I barely know any of them, so my main goal really for this entire project was to start really learning the principles and really start to incorporate them into my own animations and start just to understand maybe the workflow of this. So for example, like in this scene, you can see like the stretching of the arm to hopefully be able to like enhance the fast motion of it. And then like the squash of the weight of landing, like gravity is pushing down against them. So it just more to like emphasize the movements more. Also, another way to make animation I think look good, like for example in all like the amazing shows I was talking about, like Spider-Verse, they use a lot of smears. And I think this also helps to get a little more stylized look and to make animations look a lot better because it kind of acts as motion blur, which enhances the look of fast motion. So yeah, I also tried to do this in some of my scenes as well, in the post-processing. Some scenes I also want to practice my walk cycle and run cycles since I really struggle with these, and especially walk cycles the most. My walk cycles always just feel really clunky, and honestly I'm still not really sure why. Hopefully with more practice I'll start to understand why, but yeah. Overall, my animation process was just a lot of trying to keep those principles in mind while also using a lot of references. And now let's talk about the effects. I think we all know that Avatar has a lot of effects. And the best way I could think of doing them here while making them look decent was using videos online of just like fire, smoke, and then just projecting them onto a plane in 3D. Like Arcane, they use a lot of 2D effects, which is why it looks so good. But they are actually animating it frame by frame, whereas I am just projecting a 2D video. So mine is definitely going to look worse. But yeah, overall, this was my entire process, and taking about 2 weeks or so, I was able to finish it, and honestly, I don't really know how happy I am with it in the end. I feel like when you're always working on it and seeing it every single day, it starts to not look as good to the actual creator. So I'm not really sure in the end if it turned out well, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoy my recreation of Avatar in 3D.